In this video, I'd like to talk about the circumference of a circle. Now, circumference is essentially the word for the perimeter of a circle. Or in other words, it's the length around the outside of the circle. So let's write that down, that the circumference is just the length around the outside of a circle. And circles have a very unique property about them. So when looking at any size circle, so we can look at this larger circle here, or maybe a smaller one, or even a more medium-sized circle. When we compare the length around a circle to the length across a circle, and we call this the diameter, the length across a circle that goes through the center point, that's called the diameter. And when we compare the length around the circle to this diameter, we can notice something interesting about circles. In fact, what I mean by comparing them is that if we look at their ratio, so if we take the circumference and we divide it by the diameter, no matter what the size of the circle is, it's always equal to the same number. In fact, it's equal to pi. So let's say that C is the circumference. And we'll say that D is the diameter. Remember, diameter is just the length through the middle of the circle that goes through the center point. And if we take the circumference and we divide it by the diameter, no matter what the size of the circle is, this is always equal to the number pi. And remember, pi is that special irrational number, or a lot of people refer to it as the circle number. But when we look at it as a decimal, it's 3.14159, and it's irrational, so its decimal expansion is going to go on forever. So it won't have a pattern in its decimal, and it will go on forever. Now, you can also just approximate it as roughly 3.14. And that's what we'll do in this example problem. But any circle, no matter what size it is, when you look at the length around the circle and you divide it by the length across the circle through the center point, that ratio is equal to pi. And we can use this ratio to come up with a formula for the circumference. So let me just rewrite it over here that we have the circumference divided by the diameter is equal to pi. So if we want a formula for the circumference, let's just multiply each side of this equation by that diameter. So that on the left-hand side, diameter divided by diameter, that's going to cancel out. And we just get that the circumference is equal to pi multiplied by the diameter. Now, you might also see that the diameter is really just twice the radius of the circle. So the radius, remember, that goes from the center point to the edge of the circle. So let me draw that out explicitly. So if we look at a line that goes through the center of the circle, we know that the entire line is the diameter. But if we just look at half that line, so from the center point to the edge of the circle, that's what we call the radius of the circle. So the diameter is twice the radius, and we can call the radius r. So when we rewrite the formula in terms of the radius, the circumference is pi multiplied by twice the radius. And often, let me just make a little bit of room here, you will see this written as 2 pi multiplied by the radius. So you can see this formula in many different ways. It's either pi times the diameter or twice pi multiplied by the radius. And both of those formulas are completely valid for figuring out the circumference. And so in this example problem, we have a circle that has a circumference of 3.14. So in this case, we're told C is 3.14 units, and we need to figure out the diameter. So let's use our formula. We're just going to plug in 3.14 for C here and solve the equation for D. So we have 3.14 is equal to pi multiplied by that diameter. And we're going to use 3.14 for pi. So let me just make a little bit more room and we can finish this problem here. So substituting in the approximate value for pi, we have 3.14 is equal to 3.14 multiplied by that diameter that we're trying to find. And dividing each side by 3.14, we get that 3.14 divided by 3.14 is equal to the diameter. And something divided by itself is always just equal to 1. So in this case, the diameter of our circle is simply equal to 1. And we could say this is just 1 unit since it didn't specify what the unit is. So the main idea with these types of problems is that you want to use the formula. So either pi multiplied by the diameter or twice pi multiplied by the radius. Either version of the formula works, but ultimately you will need this to answer problems about the circumference or possibly the diameter or radius of a circle.